Welcome to Liberty Lighthouse. I'm Trevor Fye.
And I'm Patrick Fiel. So today we're going to be discussing, first thing, the Trump White House leak that happened earlier this week. It was from the phone calls from his first week in inauguration. It was with Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto and Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull. These were very important calls that were widely reported on when they were happened about some details. They now only have leaked transcripts of what happened. So first one that happened was with Mexican President Enrique Peña Nieto. They were discussing the border wall in which Enrique repeatedly said, "We are not going to pay for this wall." Trump kept on pushing and, for example, said stuff such as, "You cannot go to the press with that because this will kill me." He seemed to be really focused on Enrique not talking about this so that he could try and either figure something out or at least try and politically maneuver around it. Leftists are saying this is he's focused more on politics than the actual policy of it, where some other people are saying maybe this is just a negotiating strategy. It's too early to tell, in my opinion. One of the things he said was, "We will work this out in a formula somehow. It will come out in a wash." And President Enrique Peña Nieto said, no, this is not happening. Trump then said that he will not meet with Enrique because of the fact that he would not work with him. Now, the second call with President Turnbull was focused more on Obama's deal to take in refugees into the country. Trump said, "I'm not going to allow this. They're bad people." President Turnbull's tried to say, well, they're economic refugees, so it's okay. Either way, President Trump was, in my opinion, reasonably afraid about taking in what was reported about 2,000 new refugees just in this year. After some back and forth, Trump hung up the call after saying, "This is the most unpleasant call I've had all day." Now, that was already kind of disclosed. If you remember him, there was reported on how he hung up on the Australian Prime Minister. And so one thing I want to talk about with you, Trevor, is Obama or any other previous president, if they set up a deal, is it the next president's job to then continue with it?
Well, you and I have differing stances on what we should do with refugees, but to answer your question, I do not believe this was passed by the Senate and delivered to the president, and I don't think that the president has any constitutional authority to make deals with a foreign leader without Senate's approval. So, in terms of this actual deal, I don't believe he has any legal precedent Trump doesn't have any legal precedent to actually have to follow through with it. But if we want to talk on a different level with the refugee deal, we have a much larger issue to look at when it comes to dealing with refugees, especially talking about what we're doing in Syria, the intervention and stuff like that. Which, I mean, you and I will both agree that we should pull the troops out of the Middle East.
Oh, absolutely.
Definitely do that. But I think as long as we're going to continue to intervene in there, it's kind of expected that refugees are going to be looking for places. And I fully agree with the president here that they need to be fully vetted. You need to go through and check out everything. But to totally just say, no, we're going to close down our borders, I can't agree with the president on that.
Now, this is earlier in his term, and he seems a little bit more willing to open up to refugees right now. For example, his travel ban was more of a time-sensitive one, in which he said that he wanted to revamp the vetting system, which I can understand. It seems like we've been just having refugees pouring in, and I think it's reasonable definitely to at least say, even if we want to, allow refugees, is saying, okay, if we're going to allow them, is it so bad to say, hey, can we take just a short pause? I just came into the White House. Let us look over this system again.
The problem with that not being reasonable is, at that point, you're making it seem like, okay, I'm just getting into this. I'm just new. Let me relax a little bit. That as a president, you got to go straight into it. You have to constantly make these choices. And it's a difficult choice because as much as we know there are people out in Syria, other war-torn nations in the Middle East who could use help, you have to draw a line where who can come in, how they come in, stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see how it develops. But right now, going back to the original question, we don't have to listen to the Australian Prime Minister, pretty much.
Okay. Now the other big thing, probably the bigger headline out of this, is not like the context of the call, but we have transcripts that leaked from a secure line in the White House between three world leaders. I mean, this is ridiculous. I know a lot of the mainstream media and such have been trying to say, they're small leaks, they're not. This is a big deal. This is a call in which Trump and other world leaders have the expectation that their calls are secure in the White House.
Yeah, you make a really good point on that because, initially when we first talked about this, I had really thought, you know what? Being more open is better. It's because, he's a world leader, government leader, and I'm always for more government transparency.
Definitely.
But thinking about it a little bit, you do sort of have that element of trust, like thinking, especially on a super controversial issue like refugees and such, where maybe both world leaders don't want to talk about it in public because, you have an upcoming election, you have a Senate you have to convince or whatever. So being able to keep a secure line, that alone you need to maintain in order to keep the White House strong. Because if you can have people... Now, whether or not the line was still strong and it was just a recording or someone actually got into the line, I'm not quite sure what happened yet. I don't know enough about this story. But you're still setting the precedent that, hey, we can get into the White House, we can have access to their communication system, and that can present a lot of problems, not just for negotiating amongst peaceful leaders, but if we were to get into a situation where we have two leaders communicating through a war, like we had between Kennedy and the Soviet Union leaders, slipping my mind at this moment. But, they had a 6-hour delay in what they had, and, of course, we had to revamp the communication system. So it'll be interesting to see what happens from here, because the White House needs to sort of clamp down on this before it becomes a larger issue.
Yeah, I understand, definitely want to keep transparency, but there are a certain amount of the fact that he's still the president, he still needs... And then also the world leaders, are they going to feel comfortable talking to Trump if they're worried about what they're going to say is going to end up on the Washington Post's front page? It's becoming to the point where these White House... Because sometimes Trump has... And, I'm wearing my MAGA hat. I like my guy Trump. But there's a certain amount of the fact they'll be claiming leakers when they're not really leaks. There's a difference between a leak and a good investigative reporter. For example, when there's disputes between staffers, that's not really a leak. That's just investigative journalism. But this is a leak. This is a big one, and it's starting to get to the point where it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, at this point, you need to look at it more not from the perspective of, hey, let's go after Trump, but you have to protect the Oval Office. You have to protect the presidency, not Trump, but the presidency itself.
Absolutely.
All right. Diving into next is a topic that I really love. I love this guy. His name is Austin Peterson. He's running for Senate in Missouri. Now, Austin, he ran as a Libertarian for president in 2016. He lost to Governor Johnson by almost 34 points, but he forced a second ballot. And that's a pretty big deal because this kid, pretty much, from Missouri, forced a former sitting governor to a second ballot. Now, he announced his run for Senate July 4th. I was watching it on the Facebook live stream. I was so thrilled to see him finally run. And he's running as a Republican, which I find super interesting, but probably the best move if he actually wants to make it to Washington in 2018. So far, there are no challengers in the race, but Attorney General Josh Hawley and State Representative Paul Kurtman have both filed exploratory committees. Now, I want to dive more into Hawley because this is what this sort of all goes about. Is Austin Peterson is well known for trolling people.
Absolutely.
Professionally doing it too. Like, I have a bow tie, but I'm still going to destroy you. So, earlier he even, like, this was his first little shot at it, is if you go to fireclaire.net, it goes to donating to his campaign. He's great at doing this. He's buying the great domains. But anyways, I want to get into the Missouri's Attorney General, Josh Hawley. He's the establishment pick. He's the guy that, you know what, this is who the GOP wants. We're going to do this. He's going to look great. He's this really young. He looks attractive to voters. He's this great young kid. But he had this advertisement for his run for not U.S. Senate, but Attorney General, where he said that he was not going to be another career politician using this election to climb the office. So what's he doing? He's using this position to climb the political office. And Austin Peterson did a great job because they picked up right away. The campaign bought the domain name JoshHawley2018.com, and it redirects to an ad of the exact commercial Hawley put out of him saying, I'm not here to climb the ladder, I'm here to do all this, blah. But he did it, and then I think you can link yourself to go donate to his campaign again. But I'm curious to see your thoughts on this, because I saw some people were pretty upset about it because they're like, oh, this is unprofessional, how can you be doing this? When someone like me, I'm like, this is a good idea. You're buying a domain name and taking that away from him. And then two, you're like, he set himself up so well, and Austin was the first one to get on there, so boom, that's press. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
So, first thing, everybody's saying, that's unprofessional or whatever. I just want to remind you that in the first debate, our current president started it off with Megyn Kelly asking him, you call women fat pigs, slobs, and then he said only Rosie O'Donnell. So I don't think professionalism is necessarily the most important thing in politics nowadays. And also, it's not like Josh Hawley, because I actually do know a little bit about this story. Josh Hawley wasn't in that position for years or something. He took that position 6 months ago. He got elected during the 2016 election. Yeah. So he is not... If he filled out, at least one term, just one term, I would say, okay, he did his term. But he hasn't. It's a 4-year term for the Attorney General, and he's leaving it within 6 months to go run for Senate. So, really, And also, Austin Peterson is constantly being silenced by the establishment. Austin Peterson is an insanely popular person. I mean, he has millions and millions of followers, and it seems ridiculous that he never gets any sort of mainstream press attention. Austin Peterson is actually committed right now to running for Senate. Josh Hawley...
100%.
Yeah, and Josh Hawley is filing an exploratory committee. Yeah, I can see more articles about Josh Hawley running for Senate than Austin Peterson, even though he only has an exploratory committee. So it's not like, he's even announced his campaign. So it's just, Austin Peterson needs to try and get the press, and I think this was an absolutely hilarious, genius move.
Definitely. Yeah. I found him during the course of the 2016 election. I found him, again, he's just that, such a positive person to be around. He's like, he walks in the room. There was this one story he was telling about, it was when John McAfee just announced his run in Georgia. And there's this huge line for John McAfee because we know how, it's John McAfee.
Yeah, he's like a tech billionaire. And
yeah, he's this awesome tech tycoon guy. And what Austin did, and this means a lot to me, is he was able to move people together. He went around shaking hands in that line, introduced himself to every single person in that line, and he was just great at doing it. And I think the Senate campaign, he has a real good shot. Long road, but good shot.
And also, can we just remember that Austin Peterson had this grassroots explosion during the presidential campaign, but he still lost. And maybe it was because he was being too nice of a guy. Maybe it's time that Austin Peterson stop being as nice of a guy. Not saying that he has to go dirty and personal like a lot of politicians are, but this wasn't dirty and personal. This was purely political, and it was a little dirty, yeah, but it was smart, and it's the type of stuff that gets you attention and wins elections.
Well, to put it in perspective, his whole presidential campaign raised a little over $100,000. He already raised that. So
Good. Yeah, absolutely.
made the right choice running as a Republican. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break. Thank you very much. Welcome back, folks. We're just going to dive right back into it. You had a story about an airline and a celebrity, which sounds great.
You know the joke about airlines and celebrities. So, because this is our first show, I just want to say, while most of our stories are going to be political, we decided that we wanted to do one story a week that may be more pop culture for viewers of the podcast that may be not as politically inclined. But this does have a bit of a political tinge. So basically, Lena Dunham, who is a widely known feminist, and she's a co-star on the HBO show called Girls, made a big deal a few days ago when she reportedly heard some American airline employees saying comments that she described as transphobic. They said that they would never accept a trans kid, that trans kids are a trend, and that transness is gross. American Airlines spent a good amount of resources looking into this, trying to find it out. They asked her what gate she was at. They looked over camera footage. They spent a lot of time on this, and then found that her claims, as they said, cannot be substantiated. So the discussion around this is less about, I don't really want to concern myself with whether or not what the airline employees reportedly said was good. I'm not going to get into that. But it is that this caused political pressure on the airlines. And when we have tons of things to attack airline employees about, is caving to political pressure the right thing for any company? Do you believe that when there are political pressure, whether it be from the left with airlines having to do with the trans employee, or for example back do you remember a year ago when Target announced that they would allow trans employees, and then they had a huge amount of pressure from the right? But interestingly enough, American Airlines immediately caved to the political pressure from the left, but Target stayed their ground and withstood the pressure from the right, and that seemed to pass. Do you think that would continue? Do you think that the left has more political pressure to make an airline actually change a policy?
Well, I do want to correct you here. Target did end up changing their policies and said that their stores had to add a non-gender specific bathroom. So they did. They went middle ground. And talking about this entire thing, I think this is kind of the beauty of the free market here is, while, regardless of your thoughts on the LGBTQ issues and how different things should work, this is free market at work. There are people who complained, and the company adjusted. Now, whether or not you agree with it, I mean, I'm sure there will be a conservative backlash from or against American Airlines, but I think it's an important issue that this isn't legislated by the government. Now, this would be a totally different issue if Congress made a law saying you have to accept this, or you should, or you can't accept this.
Which didn't Obama try to do that?
He did. He did. But still, my point is that the free market is the best possible solution to almost any issue that I can think of.
Yeah, and I don't think American Airlines is going to receive a backlash because, as I said, it cannot be substantiated. And this is an issue with the power that celebrities have, to the point where they spend time and resources to look into an issue that, after all investigations, finding out that there was nothing there. And so I think as you know, I believe in the free market, as you know. But there's also a certain amount of the fact that celebrities and this increased hype of feminist paranoia has caused it to the point where companies are so scared of being accused of being racist, misogynist, transphobic, homophobic, that they have to just, whenever a celebrity makes an issue, they say jump and the company says how high.
Well, you have that issue, but again, it's the business has to do what's best for the business at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
You can't sit there and say, all right, we're just going to take a 20% hit in our sales. I have no idea if that's what this will cause. Who knows? But it's I want to emphasize that free markets is why issues like this exist. Now, if it were to be legislated, you and me both would regardless of how it was legislated, we would probably disagree with it because it's being legislated.
Absolutely. I know that you and I have different opinions on the transgender issue, but any single time that government steps in and tries to tries to say how a business or how people can react to something, it's just again one of those issues that the government should not be mandating mostly anything.
Yeah, pretty much. All right. Hopping into our next issue is something that really kind of riled me up a little bit just because we're seeing this trend more and more in Republican politics. West Virginia Governor Jim Justice, who's a Democrat, or was a Democrat anyway, he decided to move to the GOP on August 4th. Now, the GOP might be able to consider this a win because this ties the record for the most sitting Republican governors, which is 34, and that record was set back in 1922 when we had the greatest president to live, Calvin Coolidge. But here's the thing. This Jim Justice issue gets really interesting because before 2015, he was a Republican. Then, when the election came up, he became a Democrat. Then, after he won August 4th, he switched back to being a Republican.
I did not know that part.
Yeah. But here's the thing. I don't think he switched because, he tried to pull this whole stunt with saying, the Democrats walked away from me. I can't help you anymore being a Democrat. I'm not sure if he's trying to make himself look like a modern-day Ronald Reagan. I have no idea what he's trying to do. But he supported an increase in sales tax. He wanted to reinstate the business and occupation tax. Then he opposed cuts in healthcare and education spending. What in there sounds like a fiscal conservative? Nothing. Nothing at all. So, and this is a trend that we've been starting to see more and more, especially starting with Trump, who was a Democrat until 2009, I think. And when
he donated to Hillary Clinton's run in 2008.
Right. So, he goes in on this, and he has this entire thing about, and it's sort of this nationalist movement that we're starting to see within the GOP that I think is going to start turning off more middle ground people, but attracting more, your hard right-wingers. But I just want to point out that it's not just an issue with a Democrat actually becoming a Republican, because if you look at John Kasich, he's so nice. I don't want to do this to him. But he's a pretty liberal Republican.
Yeah, I'm curious how, because Kasich says so many liberal things. Mm-hmm. How close is he? Is he considered establishment at this point? Because I've probably been so far into this right wing. Where is the establishment at this point? Because I hear about these establishments to the point, but then I think, okay, well, maybe Marco Rubio is more of the establishment, but John Kasich is left of Marco Rubio, so where is the establishment?
Well, again, I'm going to name drop Austin Peterson again. He made a great point by saying, no one knows what a Republican is right now. Is it a John Kasich type bleeding heart Republican? Is it a Trump nationalist, no immigrants kind of type? Or is it an Austin Peterson freedom ninja kind of type party? We'll all figure that out. It'll be fun. But there are tons of ways this can be perceived. I mean, you can sort of start to see the fractures within the major parties. I mean, Bernie Sanders brought it out on the left. The Liberty Caucus is doing it right now. God bless the Liberty Caucus. But it's certainly going to be interesting seeing how we want to move forward, how the GOP wants to move forward. So it's Jim Justice, you're not a Republican, or at least not a Republican I consider. I'm sorry.
I think there's a really good point when you touched on, and this identity crisis that the Republican Party is having. I think it's partially because of the fact that people are starting to want liberty more, and so that fringe idea that the Liberty Caucus resembles of this very fiscally conservative, socially not as much.
Do whatever the hell you want.
And I think what happened is that it started growing, especially with that Tea Party explosion that we had back in 2012.
2010.
Oh, yeah, 2010. And so it's causing, there's so many things now that are being called Republican. And I think on the left side of the Republican field, I think you had people who are being turned off because the Democrats, as you see, are embracing this identity politics. And it's pushing out the people who, white working class voters, even back as far as Bill Clinton, were Democrats. My grandfather, he is being disgusted by this because he was considered a Democrat all his life, and generally Republicans and right-wingers were generally more people who were just really rich people who wanted tax cuts. And the thing is that the Republican Party is doing really good outreach into these country, rural people that maybe would be more welfare prone, such as, again, that white working class. They might be, but they're coming to the Republican Party on the left side, and then on the right side you have people funneling in that one, and it's just causing this. And I think that you previously talked about this really well when you said that the Republican Party is going to have to split because it's too big, it's exact resemblance of what libertarians have been saying, in that a two-party system does not serve well, because we're a big country with a lot of ideas, and you got progressives that are left of the Democrat Party, especially when they cut Bernie Sanders, they really screw themselves over. Oh, yeah. So you got the Green Party kind of growing. On the far right, you got people growing there, although the Libertarian Party has their own issues. And so they're growing, and then you're seeing the Democrat Party is probably the only one that's kind of bleeding voters at this point. Yeah. Green Party is getting bigger, which, if you need to see how much people are tired with two-party system, just see the fact that the Green Party is growing.
Hey, Ralph Nader tried.
Ralph Nader tried. But then you got the Democrat that are kind of just like this montage of ethnic voters that don't realize that the Democrat Party's not serving them. You got gay voters that don't realize that they're not serving them. And so they're starting to realize this, and the Republican Party is just having this influx of people. I think it's partially because of the fact that that's the only party that they know, other than Democrats. And so then you have, a governor who I think Jim Justice, from what I've heard, a lot of the reason that he's switching is just because he's pretty much what a Democrat would have been 20 years ago.
Well, and here's a good point about Jim Justice. He's in the middle of coal country. The Democrats are attacking coal country. So while I think this is a ploy to get reelected, I don't know when his reelection is, probably in 4 years, but I think this is him trying to, all right, the Democrats aren't popular in my state because they want to take away jobs. They want to end an industry. I mean, you have your opinions on coal, but jobs are jobs to these people.
Oh, absolutely.
So
I would never attack a coal worker for wanting to protect their own job.
Right. And so he's making a decision long run, but he has to hope that if it doesn't work in the short run, he might lose his seat.
Okay, so our next story is probably the biggest story of the week. Robert Mueller has a grand jury to help with his Russia investigation. I'm taking the hat off because the story's that important. So, it's been big news all over. Oh no, grand jury for the Robert Mueller investigation. So, in some ways it is a big deal, because of the fact that grand juries do have massive subpoena powers. Grand juries can issue subpoenas for documents, testimonies, evidence anywhere in their geographic jurisdiction, which, because this is a federal case, that's the entirety of the United States. Now, reports are saying that, this means the case is heating up, this case is serious. I do believe that it indicates that, the case is serious, because they do have a grand jury. But also, couldn't that mean that he's having trouble finding stuff, so he needs a grand jury to try and find more evidence? That's up for debate. That's just was my personal takeaway from it. Now, one thing that's been issued with this report about the grand jury is that they're widening their search less to look more into just Trump's direct collusion with Russia and looking at the Trump and the Trump corporations' finances, see if there's any link with that, anybody associated with the Trump corporation. So it's really like they're really broadening their scope here. Now, I do want to point out that Trump probably has business dealings with Russia, but he was a businessman. Up until, 2015, when he announced his candidacy, he was a private citizen running a business. So, yes, there's going to be business dealings probably in Russia. It's a very large country. And that will probably lead, if you think about it, to some dealings with the Russian government. Because the way Russia operates, because it's a bunch of dirty communists, is that if you deal with a Russian corporation, you have to do some dealings with the Russian government. Any sort of reports about, dealing with Russian corporations, you see that there is some sort of overlap with the government because it is a communist state.
It's a socialist state. A European socialist state. Don't call it communist.
Which basically means communism. So, one thing I've been seeing with these reports about grand jury is saying grand juries are a big deal. Grand juries. Well, let's look at a little bit what is a grand jury. So a grand jury is 23 people who work for a prosecutor to figure out if there's a trial to bring. So if the grand jury says, yeah, let's do this, it's only them saying, let's do a trial. It doesn't convict anybody of a crime. When they issue these subpoenas for testimony, documents, and evidence, they don't hear the defense's side. They actually only hear witnesses that the prosecutor brings. So this is not a two-sided trial. A grand jury specifically serves a prosecutor and sees whether or not there is enough to bring a case to trial, which generally with big cases like these, especially ones that would have big media attention, they tend to use grand juries because they don't want to go onto a trial if there's not even a reason to bring a case. So they cannot convict anybody. They are not able to hear any defense's testimony. They can only hear a one-sided story. So I don't necessarily think this is an indication. And unlike a lot of Trump supporters, I actually think Robert Mueller is a great person to do this. He's a very, very, very well-liked, very well-respected individual in the intelligence community. And so, this is 23 people. If 23 people, one of the most widely respected men in the intelligence community, if they all think there is something, I am willing to admit, yes, maybe there's something. But also, I believe in my president to the point where I don't think that there is anything. And I think that he will come out of this clean. And I think if we have a grand jury and Robert Mueller all say there's nothing here, no matter how much the Democrats try to push, I think that we have to accept that and stop pushing this false Russian narrative. So, that being said, Trevor, I went really alt-right kind of on this. So let's hear your position on this.
Well, we've been talking about Russia since the election. It has been driven home, and we've heard anything that, I just want to point out for a fact that Hillary did work with the Russians back as her job as Secretary of State. So I find it a little funny that the Democrats choose to use that country of all countries. But I'm interested to see where this goes, because I've always been a little skeptical of Trump and his administration. There's clearly been some form of contact, whether it's legal or illegal. We'll find out. Mm-hmm. And I'm interested to see where it goes. I don't want to draw any conclusions right now, just specifically because I don't want to disrespect the office if I'm going after a president wrongly. I don't want to do that because, I mean, you saw that a lot when conservatives would go after Obama and then when liberals would go after Trump and Bush and all that stuff. I don't want to do that here. I don't. So I just think you want to, let the prosecutors do what the prosecutors need to do, and we'll see what happens from there.
Yeah, and one thing is that this was a leak. I know we were talking about leaks earlier in the show. This was a leak. Grand juries are supposed to entirely operate in secret. They are supposed to be confidential. Everything they discuss needs to remain confidential. And this was a leak. It was not supposed to be found out that there was a grand jury because, again, this is confidential. And so I think we need to let them do their job, absolutely. Because of the fact that Russia did have effect on the election.
No, they did not. They tried, but they did not have an effect on the election.
Well, I mean, weren't they responsible for the WikiLeaks?
Well, it depends which government you listen to again. So, that's where you and I are going to disagree, and this is going to look like we're totally flipping on the situation now. Because I think it's easy to make Russia an enemy right now, or especially for the mainstream media.
I mean, they've always been the enemy.
Right. I mean, at least after World War II, it's been USA, Russia is doing all that stuff. But I find it interesting that it's been so many months and we haven't uncovered anything. I think both nations need to start healing a little bit because there have been bad. I mean, back in 1963 was that the Cuban Missile Crisis where the world almost ended, and we've been working from there. And that's one part that I'm very optimistic for the president to do is make this relationship good. I mean, not good again like they have, but good because the Russians have such a big. I mean, they have such a wide distrust for Western civilization because they've been screwed over constantly. Whether it's some country invading them or some trade deal gone wrong. So the Russians are justifiably skeptical, and I think what we have to do is mend the relationship, but also keep a watchful eye on the Russians.
I think that's not going to be helpful because earlier this week, not to go into a new news topic, but Trump announced new sanctions against Russia.
Right, and Putin told every American to get out of my embassy. So clearly the relationship still is not stable.
I mean, I don't see how everybody can be saying, "Oh, Trump loves Russia." When stuff like this happens, I mean,
he didn't want to sign it. Remember, it was overwhelmingly passed. Justin Amash, Thomas Massey, and another congressman voted no. But again, those were the only 3 no votes. And then
why are they people that are so from the Libertarian?
You're about to freak out here. In the Senate, the only no votes were Rand Paul and Bernie Sanders.
Those two go hand in hand.
Oh yeah, definitely. So it's interesting to see where this will develop. I'm curious to see because I've been skeptical of the entire Trump presidency. I haven't been a fan of it at all. The only thing I really care about is Neil Gorsuch is now sitting on the court. So we'll have to see where that goes. All right. Next, what we want to do on the show at the end of each show is we want to talk about up-and-coming libertarians. And that's not just, in the party, but that's, maybe a libertarian, Republican, an independent, something like that. So our very first profile is going to be on someone running in Patrick's home district for state representative, David Mann. He's running in the 78th District of Michigan, which covers the southern half of Berrien County and maybe a little bit of Cass County. I'm not quite sure. But anyways, I've met him. I talked to him. Great guy. He's going to be working a lot with Patrick Colbeck in his run for Michigan's governor's seat. But and this is all according to his campaign website. This dude sounds like he could easily pop on, get the entire Liberty torch and just sing "God Bless America." But he wants to get rid of regulations that hurt businesses and have welfare reform. And if that doesn't scream fiscal conservative, I'm not really sure what will.
No, I mean, I think our welfare state in Michigan is probably, I imagine, at least one of the worst in the country. I mean, look at Detroit.
So welfare reform and getting rid of regulations that are going to hurt business is great. Then, this is a debate that libertarians will continue to have for millennia. He is pro-life and believes it begins at conception. That is one part that me being a pro-life Austin Peterson type libertarian, I absolutely love, but could be a turn-off to, the middle of the ground type libertarians, the ANCAP libertarians, or the majority of libertarians, actually.
Because actually the Libertarian Party platform is pro-choice.
Right.
Which, that's not going to help with trying to get them Republicans on over.
Well, you can't have liberty without life.
Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. That's what my mama told me.
All right, and then...
Actually, my mom's a Democrat.
Next, he's also big into personal freedom, again, continuing that libertarian trend. And
now, let me stop you right there, Trevor. Can I ask you the question that everybody under the age of 25 makes their entire voting decisions based on? Does he like weed?
I believe, and don't quote me on this, I'm not positive, I believe he wants to make the drug epidemic a medical problem. So if that gives you any hint to where he might lean... Now, again, we'll have to personally ask him that. Hopefully we can have him on the show, but...
Cross my fingers.
Hopefully. And continuing on education reform, this guy wants to do. He wants to give more choice to the parents. He wants to say, no, federal government, no, Michigan. Next, this is coming straight from his website. This talks about the Second Amendment. Again, another big libertarian topic. Straight from his website, it says, gun ownership is not a privilege. It is a right and one that David will always fight for. Weapons aren't dangerous, criminals are. And you bring up that point. Yeah, criminals are always going to find a way to kill people. Criminals are always going to find a way to do criminal stuff. So why make it more difficult for someone like you or me to defend ourselves? If someone's going to come at me with an AK-47, why shouldn't I have the ability to defend myself with an AK-47?
One thing I think is really, really hit that point home is if you've actually been doing a lot of, if you do any looking at international news, which I try and do, there's been a huge rise within the last few months of acid attacks in Britain.
Wow.
Britain has had, I actually heard this on NPR, so even liberals will believe it. Britain has had these huge amounts of acid attacks. People taking chemicals that you can buy from any normal grocery store and making acid that they throw on, and it disfigures people. It's horrible. And honestly, I'm more scared about that than a gun. Because acid attacks are vicious. You generally don't even get the joy of dying at that point. You're literally just having your skin melting while you're alive. It's horrible, and that really hits that point home that criminals will always hurt you. You will always be in danger. And if you're a law-abiding citizen, the only difference is that you cannot defend yourself, or you have to break the law, and the next thing you know, you go home for jail for just owning a gun.
Right. Again, folks, his campaign website is manforrep.com. Man has two N's, MANNFORREP.com.
We'll put a link in the description.
Definitely. Thank you for being a part of the first show. This is going to be very rough, but we appreciate it. Everyone, Mikki behind the camera doing all the work. Jocelyn for making the great logo. We appreciate everything everyone has put into this first show.
And we're going to be putting her Instagram in the description. You should go check her out. She's a really talented artist. Important enough that I'm even going to put my head on front ways. So Jocelyn Shade, she's a great artist. We're going to have her link in there. I'm going to try and put the link right here so that you can see it, but we're a startup, so we don't really have any production value.
Yeah,
We're just winging
this is
it.
a low budget thing. But follow our
budget.
Facebook, the Liberty Lighthouse, and then follow us on Twitter at the Liberty LH.
And Facebook.com is if you just want the link, it's Facebook.com/the Liberty LH or the Liberty Lighthouse on Facebook, Liberty Lighthouse on Twitter, but the handle is at Liberty LH. And also subscribe to us on YouTube, or else you're a communist. Like us on Facebook, or else you're a socialist. And like us on Twitter, or you're a fascist.
Thank you for being a part of this first experience. We'll see you next week.